Today, in current events from a Christian perspective, a man who dresses like a woman gets to #1 on the Christian music charts. Seriously, Christians, what is going on here? Meanwhile, in Texas, a teacher at a Christian school is fired for celebrating some of those guys who dress like women. And then lastly, we look at a young man who was arrested for reading the Bible at a drag event in a public park. All this and more today. I'm Matt Odegaard, and this is Church Public. Welcome back to Church Public. Again, I am your host, as always, Matt Odegaard, and I really appreciate you stopping by and spending some time with me today. Your time's valuable, and I want to honor that. Today, we'll be looking at some current events from a Christian perspective, because I think that helps us to understand how to live out your faith in everyday context. And we've got some, I would say, rather weird stories today, but we'll get to those in due time. If you haven't already and you want to, click the subscribe button and the share button and the like button and all the buttons. Just look at your phone or your laptop or whatever you're on and just hit lots of buttons, because I think the internet people like that. We'll see what happens. Anyway, if you're just listening on audio and you want to see this on video, you can go to churchpublic.com and check out the video podcast there. I will try to get it up regardless of what platform is on, so we'll just leave it at that for now and appreciate you stopping by. So let's get to some news. All right, so we got a lot of things going on today, and we'll just hit some. I don't really want to talk about this again because I already talked about it. If you missed it, I did talk about Snow White and what is going on with Snow White. I kind of did a fairly deep dive on fairy tales in general, because a lot of fairy tales, whether you believe it or not, whether you knew it or not, actually reference spiritual realities. And if nothing else, fairy tales were written specifically to give moral lessons to children, because what better way to teach children about morality and sometimes even faith than telling them a great story? That's what humanity's been doing forever, and some of these fairy tales are just like that. So Snow White's another one of those. I'm not going to get into all of that today again, but I came across another little clip of this new Snow White that Disney is remaking that is less Snow White and more snow something else. But anyway, I just felt like we had to look at this clip from a cultural perspective and talk about this as kind of a current event, because currently they're remaking, or maybe they've done and now they're just doing the rounds, but they're remaking this Snow White. And I think it's important to look at it and talk about, well, what is different here? What's changed here? And what do we need to talk through in this? So let's take a look at this little video clip, and then we'll talk about some of the things that I see in it.
The reality is that the cartoon was made 85 years ago. It's extremely dated when it comes to the ideas of women being in roles of power and what a woman is fit for in the world. And so when we came to reimagining the actual role, Snow White has to learn a lot of lessons about coming into her own power before she can come into power over a kingdom.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's the proactive one, and she's the one who set the terms, is what makes it so relevant to where we are today.
Because what you want out of a fairy tale clearly is relevance. So that was Gal Gadot and Rachel Ziegler, apparently are both in the movie. I know Ziegler is playing Snow White, or Snow a little bit different than White. And Gal Gadot, I actually don't know what her character is, and honestly don't care that much. But anyway, they're explaining why Snow White was quote unquote dated. That's their word, right? It's dated from 1930s. The Disney version, I mean, the story itself is older than that, and I read you part of that story earlier. I won't go back into that again, but Snow White is now dated. I mean, not to mention that they've removed the beauty of the story, the love in the story, which are, I feel like, kind of good pieces of the story, but apparently they don't. So now the ideal of the story, as you've just heard from the main characters in the story, the idea that you need to be a girl boss, because that's what every girl, really, every little girl is sitting around in their house thinking, man, I really wish I could be a girl boss. Not that, you know, some knight in shining armor would come and rescue them and they would live happily ever after. That's a terrible story, obviously. No, what a little girl now wants is #1 in her life is to be a girl boss, obviously. I mean, that's what you just heard. That's what obviously they said. And if you heard this too, Now we've changed. Who is the fairest of them all? That no longer has to do with beauty, because we don't talk about beauty. That's ridiculous. No, the fairest of them all means who is the most just. And of course, this is reading between the lines now, but that means it's obviously not a man, because we know men, I mean, they can't be just, right? Right? Apparently that's where we're going with this new Disney Snow White version. So, and again, my problem is this. My problem is I really like stories, and I think stories are important because they teach us about values and morality and faith in the best of stories. And so apparently what we've done is removed the hero's journey, right? If you know anything about stories and writing, you have a hero's journey. You have a progression from something through a conflict to a greater awareness of who they are, or the morality that they need, or something, right? So now we've moved this hero's journey from the struggle of humanity against death. That's literally the story of Snow White, from death to life eternal, through the sacrifice and struggle of the character of the son of the king. Again, the illusion, I think, is very, not illusion, but allusion, right? The thing that's alluded to, the thing that is put into the story of Snow White is the son of the king rescues not just the princess, but the whole kingdom from their death to eternal life. No, that's different. And now we're getting rid of that, and we're getting rid of the struggle against evil, right? The evil queen who literally embodies Satan and offers the evil apple to the princess. No, get rid of that. Now it's just the struggle of woman against justice, which is, of course, man, because girl boss. Yay. Anyway. So then let's back up to the very beginning. And if you were just listening, you didn't see my face. And as you know, I don't have a poker face. Whatever is happening in my brain is apparently very aware on my face. That's what I've been told repeatedly by basically everyone that I've talked to. I can't hide the thoughts and feelings that are happening in my brain, though sometimes I try. Apparently I can't. So as I was watching this and they said, oh, this story is just dated and we have to update it to make it relevant, right? That's the clip we just heard, because Snow White is dated. But what does that mean? What does it mean to be dated? Is that bad? Is it bad to be dated? Is the time we're in now? Here's a question for you. Think about this. Is the time we're in now better than the time they reference, even the 30s, as dated? Are women really happier as a whole? Is this culture really less depressed, less suicidal, and more connected, et cetera, et cetera? And I'm going to go ahead. Okay, that was a little bit of a rhetorical question. Maybe you answered it out loud. I hope you did. But by almost every measure, somewhere in the 30s, 1937, especially when this first Disney movie was produced, it certainly was better by almost every measure. Currently, depression is at an all-time high. Suicide is at an all-time high. Happiness is at an all-time low. People are not having children. They're not having babies. They're not getting married. Even architecture was way more beautiful in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and now it's hideous. Just think about that. Not to mention the murdering of tens of millions of babies since this time, and the sterilization and mutilation of children who are confused on gender currently. Is this a better time than the 30s? Than middle America? I mean, is it? Or are we just chasing some weird utopian paradise that doesn't and can never exist? I don't know. I guess you'll have to be the judge of that, but those are my thoughts on this new Snow White. I'm thinking it's not going to be very good, but I probably shouldn't have said that. Anyway, speaking of being confused on gender, oh my goodness, this story. Sometimes I want to talk about stories, and sometimes I think stories are important for us. Sometimes I think stories are important for us, and I don't really want to talk about them because I'm just like, people, stop doing crazy things. Anyway, I guess we got to talk about the story since I brought it up. So, for the first time ever, a man who performs in makeup and women's clothing has hit the #1 spot on the Christian music charts. So here is a picture of a song called Good Day by an artist named Flamy Grant. Flamy Grant. And yes, according to this artist, that is a pun on Amy Grant, who has been a Christian artist, quote unquote, for decades at this point. But this is Flamy Grant because this person is not a woman. But anyway, the story here is that Flamy Grant chose or got up to a #1 spot on the Christian music charts. This is a song called Good Day featuring Derek Webb, who we'll talk about in a moment as well. So this particular artist hit number one in the Christian music charts. And I have so many thoughts, but the first is, Christians, what are you doing? Why are we promoting this? Why are we doing this? But maybe that's the bigger cultural statement. Maybe that's really the thing that we should be talking about. Christians, quote unquote Christians, are so culturally sensitive that they would rather have this than true things. And I think that's a big problem. But we'll come back to that. So, and then apparently there was a battle online on the interwebs, on the socials, where Sean Foyt, Christian worship leader extraordinaire who has been touring the country and doing these big worship concerts around, and especially on some state capitals and state buildings and fighting against things. I don't agree with everything that Sean does, though I appreciate that he is trying to bring awareness to Jesus and worship in general. Again, theologically, I've got some differences. I don't need to talk about that particularly right now, but apparently he did a post on this person, Flamy Grant, and then that went viral, and then the response going viral apparently was to rocket this artist to number one on the Christian music charts. So the artist, quote unquote, Flamy Grant, whose real name apparently is Matthew Blake, wears makeup, women's clothing, performs under this name Flamy Grant, and released this album Bible Belt Baby last year, but it shot up to the number one spot because of whatever viral thing that was going on there. I'll just show you this little bit as we think about this.
I don't know how y'all did it in less than 24 hours. I'm the first drag queen to ever have a song on the Christian iTunes charts. We're number 4.
Okay, that's enough of that. Anyway, you kind of get the idea there. And prior to this collaboration, Derek Webb featured this performer on one of his videos, one of his songs and videos in his album. I believe it was the Jesus Hypothesis, excuse me. And the song for Derek was called Boys Will Be Girls. Of course, a play on words of the boys will be boys, which is true and actually a good thing. Now, of course, in our world, we have boys will be girls. And I'm hesitant to press the button to watch this, but let's watch a couple of seconds of this and see how long I can take it.
Sisters, sometimes boys will be girls. Oh, boys will be girls.
Okay, that's enough of that for that. So if you are just listening and not watching, it's Derek Webb, also dressed up in drag with Flamy Grant, dressed up in drag singing Boys Will Be Girls. It goes on. I don't really want to, but you get the idea. And for those, so where do I go with this? If you've been around church, if you've been around worship and music in the Christian contemporary scene, you are familiar with Derek Bell. Derek Webb. Derek Bell has jumped into the CRT world for a second there. Sorry about that. Derek Webb, you're familiar with because he was one of the founding members, I believe, of Caedmon's Call. And Caedmon's Call now is also back together, and they did a reunion tour just a little while ago where Derek also participated. And if you are not old enough and you don't know Caedmon's Call, they were an enormously successful band a couple of decades ago. I mean, enormously successful. And Derek Webb's, he has, I think I have this right, publicly said he's not a believer anymore, I guess, or has a different kind of Jesus. I don't know. It's another one of these deconstructionist, ex-evangelical stories where he's gone off and done his own thing. He's been pretty public about it. I don't think I'm saying anything out of school there. So it's not particularly surprising. And you can't really even fault him because he apparently claims he's not a believer anymore. But the problem that we have to talk about here is that apparently on the Christian charts, this song and this person went to number one, and we need to think carefully about that. What are we saying is valuable, not as a person, but as a theology in Christianity? Are we saying that boys will be girls? Are we saying that men can become women? And that's a biologically true thing, and a spiritually true thing, and a soul true thing, right? Can your soul transform from who God made it to be into whomever you want it to be? Is that a theological reality? Is that a reality that can actually happen? Because that's what these two people are saying, that it can actually happen, that this is a real thing, not just physically, but to go kind of Aristotelian on you, metaphysically, more than physically, right? The physical is the material, your five senses, what is real. The metaphysical is what is beyond the five senses, the spiritual, right? In the spiritual realm, in the spiritual way. The idea behind being transsexual, you're more than who you are physically. That's the whole idea. That's why it acts like a religion, because it is a religious idea, because it is more than just what you are physically. It's more than just what you are biologically. You can literally transform who you are spiritually. And from a Christian perspective, we can't agree with that, because that's not biblical. That there's no biblical value. There's no biblical reality where you can transform your soul other than the one biblical reality of transformation of soul, which is being born again. Not being born into a new gender, but being born into a new heart and a new body through Christ, his sacrifice, the power of the Spirit, and God the Father, who provides this opportunity for you through that. That's the only thing you can do for a soul transformation. Anything else is not biblical. Anything else. All right, let's keep going. Meanwhile, in Texas school news, there was a teacher who was fired from a Texas school for attending a drag show. This is via the Christian Post. A teacher who went to a drag show. Let's see, do I picture that? So this is, again, the drag show. Why do we have to talk about this so much? Anyway, she went to a show where men dress up as women, and she is a teacher at a Christian school. So this particular teacher shared an image of herself with drag performers at a gay bar. She claimed she was fired from her job because she was told she, quote, wasn't walking in a godly manner, unquote. She posted on July 24th that she's a teacher at First Baptist Academy Baytown in Houston. She shared an image of her and unidentified person and several men, again, wearing makeup and dressed in women's clothing. The caption was, quote, as of today, I was fired from a job of 20 years, attending a sing-along show at Hamburger Mary's. Before even getting the news of my termination, it had spread like wildfire at the church and school. They told me because I went to the show and posted a picture, I wasn't walking in a godly manner, end quote. Here's the reason we have to talk about this story. And it did go, I think it went national. The reason we have to talk about this story is this teacher apparently was a teacher for 20 years at this school. 20 years at a Christian school. It is mind-boggling to me that as a teacher at a Christian school, you don't think, hey, maybe I should live in a Christian manner. Actually, we're going to look at 1 Peter. Again, like I mentioned, I've been working through 1 Peter. We'll look at kind of the middle of chapter 1 and maybe a little of chapter 2 in a second here. But we are supposed to be holy. You know, I mean, I'll jump in even right here. Like, right, so the middle of chapter 1, you're supposed to be holy as God is holy, 1:16. And we're supposed to do that. We're not supposed to live lives that are like the culture. And if you're going to a gay bar and posing with women or men who dress up like women, I don't understand. I literally don't understand. You can try to explain it to me. Where in Scripture do you feel like that is a holy action? I cannot comprehend that. I can't comprehend how we get to that point. Now, culturally, of course I can. We just got done with celebrating Pride Month, and you're supposed to celebrate Pride, and you're supposed to laugh and celebrate and dance and parade. That's what we're supposed to do. Yet, from a biblical perspective, from a Christian perspective, especially if you work at a Christian school and you've been there for 20 years, 2 decades doing this, how can you think like this is okay? And again, I guess I can't even give this lady such a hard time because our entire culture and even some churches celebrate this now. So she probably thought it was just fine because everybody thinks it's just fine. After all, why is it not bad? And I want to talk about this too at the end. So stick around to the end because I want to talk about this and church and pastors in a moment because I want to do one more story first and come back to it. But But if our pastors aren't talking about this, why would people think it's bad? All right. No, and let me go one more step on this before we move on from this story, because I have to say things that I think are common sense, but apparently are not common sense anymore. Obviously, none of this is appropriate to teach children at all. Like, it should go without saying, but in this culture, I have to say things that should go without saying because we do things that should be common sense and go without saying. None of this is appropriate to teach children at all, especially at a school that holds Christian values. And the fact that being let go for this is even surprising, I think just reveals a lot about our culture. All right, speaking of not knowing things, the topic of the Lord's Prayer has come up again. Why? Why do these things keep coming up again? I don't know. But we're back to it again. Remember, you may or may not remember our Jeopardy clip. I played this. Let's play it again because this one is just so good.
Adjectives 200.
Matthew 6:9 says, Our Father which art in heaven, this be thy name. Hallowed be thy name.
Again, I spent too much time already. I'm not going to jump back into this, but the fact that three super smart people that are supposed to know general knowledge about everything, that's the point of Jeopardy, don't know the most famous prayer in the history of the world is just laughable to me. And I think this has been one of my most viral things. I'm not that I necessarily went viral, but this has been the most viewed thing on any of my social media accounts at this point because people are so mad about this. Some people are like, I can't believe it, but some people are so mad about this. How can you say that smart people know about Big Sky Daddy, and why should you expect that? This isn't my expectation. Jeopardy's expectation is that people know a bunch of random things about all kinds of random things. This happens to not only be a random thing, it is the foundation of Western civilization because it's the Lord's Prayer, which Judeo-Christian values are the foundation of Western civilization. You can argue it, but you're wrong. And two, it's the most famous prayer in the history of the world. So anyway, all right. Now, that's not even the story that I meant to do today. It just is funny, so I thought I would share that again. And sad. This is now a new story that I came across that Our Father, the phrase in the Lord's Prayer, is now controversial and distressing. Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, has suggested the word Father in the Lord's Prayer now is distressing for some individuals, particularly victims of abuse, or those, hear this, who have suffered under the, quote, oppressive patriarchy, end quote. Oh, the patriarchy is so bad. Just for reverence, these are the actual words of the Lord's Prayer. Again, Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our debts as we have forgiven our debtors. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Matthew 6:5-13. Again, the words of Jesus praying. He says, this is how we should pray. It's a great example. You should read it, maybe even every day. It's got so much good stuff in it. Send me a message if you want me to do a whole exposition, because I could spend 45 minutes to an hour just going through every word of this, because every word is so rich and it's so good. And Jesus is so amazing at explaining to us how we're supposed to pray. I love doing that stuff. I've been told anyway, if you want me to do that, send me a note and maybe I'll put that on my list to go through, because I would love to do that. I'm not sure anybody wants to hear that, but I would love to do that. All right. So, man, I have so many thoughts about this. The patriarchy obviously is evil according to the culture, but I just have to say this. For the pronoun police, you're arguing on the one hand, you must respect someone's pronouns. And yet, in the next breath, you say, Father God is problematic, even though that's the denomination that he chose. He wants to be called Father God throughout the whole Old Testament and the New Testament. But that's problematic. That's just a bit rich from you. But then again, I would expect nothing less. And again, here's the bottom line. I think maybe this will be the end of this conversation for today. It's all about your truth. Like that's the bottom line. That's what we hear. This is all about your truth. So you want to be respected at all costs. I must change all of my pronouns, all of my words, all of my prayers, even the words of Jesus, because you need to be respected. But if someone offends you, we have to destroy everything. We have to burn down the entire civilization, all of Western civilization, all of Christianity, all of Jesus' actual words, because you're offended. That's how this thing works. If you want me to call you whatever you want me to call you, Zim, Zer, Frog, whatever, then I have to do that. I must do that. But if someone offends you, tear the entire system down. Apparently that's how this whole thing works. All right, let's end in Wisconsin, coming back to America at a drag celebration in a public park where a young man who was literally reading the Bible in Galatians was arrested. So let's take a quick look at this. This was a guy who was arrested at a festival in Wisconsin via the Republic Sentinel. On Tuesday, viral video circulated showing Christian protesters being arrested last weekend outside an event called Pride in the Park in Watertown, Wisconsin. Let's take a look at this.
Serve one another. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and devour one another, beware lest you be consumed by one another.
So if you're just watching he's reading Galatians, and it's actually a great passage in Galatians. It's love one another, don't be mad, and don't bite and devour one another. Like, it's a great passage in Galatians, and the police are surrounding him. And let's keep watching here. So a police officer just grabs the microphone out of his hand and holds it down.
Hey, what are you doing?
What is the problem?
What's wrong with you? What are you doing? I just think that my hand. You didn't give him any warning. You just grabbed the mic. No, this is the same one that.
By the way, did you hear? No warning was given. Just grab the mic, and they're like, stop. Actually, I don't even think the guy said stop. He just grabbed the mic.
Yeah, that was in there. It was not out here. What is wrong with you? What are you doing? You didn't give us any warning. Let it go. You guys have been warned.
They said we can they said we can speak out here on the sidewalk freely.
You can speak, but there's no amplified.
Nobody told us that.
What are you doing?
So he said, if you didn't hear that, he says you can speak, but you can't use an amplifier. And the guys are like, nobody told us we can't use an amplifier. Nobody said that. So no warning.
How come there's no amplification? Hey, you guys are acting like thugs, man. You're acting like straight up thugs.
Hey, you're taking away my paper.
He has every right to be out here engaging in speech. He has every right to be out here engaging in speech.
So it goes on for a little bit, but I mean, you get the main idea. The officers pull his hands behind his back. He's holding on to the microphone and not really letting it go because he doesn't know what's going on. And they're not particularly giving commands of what to do. They're just holding his arms and then pulling his hands behind his back. And at any rate, that's kind of what goes on there. Here is a quote from the article. The police, per orders from city leaders, arrested several young people. 3 were arrested earlier in the day inside the park. So if you didn't see, if you're just listening, there was kind of one of those little metal fences. It's not a big fence, but, you know, a 3-foot fence, whatever. And they were outside of that on the sidewalk, which, by the way, is a public place, which you are allowed to have free speech on, which they say. And the police even say, yes, you're allowed to have free speech, just not with an amplifier, which apparently nobody told them. Jason Storms serves as minister of evangelism at Mercy Seat Christian Church. That's not the person who is arrested. Marcus is the person who is arrested, which we'll actually hear from in a second, which is really cool. He says, quote, "It was open to the public, thus the public's right to free speech carries with them. One was arrested later in the day for preaching on the public sidewalk outside the venue." That's who we just saw, and is being charged with unlawful use of sound amplification and resisting arrest. Unlawful use of sound amplification and resisting arrest. Interestingly, the one who was filming the video, again, Jason Storms, noted the Pride in the Park event had sessions aimed at children, and that maybe was even in greater violation of the law. He says there were several dozen police officers assembled to protect the drag queen event, during which performers dressed in lingerie and were seen, quote, dancing and gyrating in front of little children who were invited to give them $1 bills. Wisconsin law forbids individuals from causing a minor to view or listen to sexually explicit conduct, end quote. Well, that's, anyway, it shows our 2-tier law system, but we'll keep going on when we talk about that one today. So apparently, now I don't have video of this. I did see a video, but I didn't clip it. You can go watch it if you want to. But apparently, actual Nazis or people dressed like Nazis, it's unclear, showed up to this event. That's bad, of course. That's gross. It's terrible. But then this guy, Marcus, went to another council and gave a response to this. And his response is amazing. It was longer. I clipped a little bit out of it. You can go and find the longer one if you want to. But this was my favorite part. So let's take a listen to this.
when I showed up Saturday, all I did was read from Scripture on the sidewalk. I read from the Bible, Galatians. And by the way, I wasn't reading Romans 1. I wasn't reading any passage that spoke against homosexuality or anything like that. I was reading a passage from the Bible about love. And I was arrested. No reason, not given any warning, not told anything about my amplification needing to be turning down. I was arrested and taken into custody simply for reading the Bible on the sidewalk. You see, as we become more and more tolerant of sexual immorality in our culture, we've become more and more intolerant towards Christian morality. And the more we become intolerant towards Christian morality, the more we're going to see lawlessness in our streets. The more we become intolerant of Christian morality, the more we're going to see Nazis. The more we're going to see people who don't hold to a Christian worldview, who think that everybody is a result of animals, and therefore if we are animals, then why can't we just act like animals?
Sadly, his point is valid. His point is, where is your morality from? And it's a very good point, and it's a point that the left struggles to answer. Because they want to say you're just supposed to be good because you are. But their definition of good is you're supposed to let us do whatever we want, but you're not allowed to do whatever you want. Then, when something happens and quote-unquote Nazis show up, they're bad. But according to you, why are they bad? Your definition of humanity is just that we came out of some soup as amoebas and then went into fish and monkeys and now we're humans. So essentially we are just animals. That's his point. So why does it matter how we treat one another? I don't know. I can't answer that question. According to my worldview, that's not how we originated. We are uniquely and masterfully created. Everyone, every single one of us is created in God's image because of who he is and because of his love. Therefore, because he loved us, we are to love one another. That's why I don't think we should attack people. That's why I think you should know who God is and we should point out who God really is because we are living in his kingdom. But this kind of world doesn't believe that. It literally doesn't make sense to me. Why does it matter if people treat each other badly? What do you care? Isn't it just survival of the fittest? What moral code are you living by if not a moral code outside of yourself? This is his point, and it's been mine for a long time too. It doesn't make sense to me that you live morally because I don't understand where your morals come from. Are they just something you made up because it's right? And maybe, I don't know. I just don't understand it. So as Christians, he gives a really good point that we're supposed to love our neighbor, but loving them is not lying to them. And I'm gonna keep coming back to that. I love that he chose the Galatians passage, and he sort of in this video apologizes for not reading a passage about homosexuality or immorality, sexual immorality, and condemning that. It wouldn't bother me if he read either, because truth is truth. Now, there's a way you can present it. Of course, you don't want to beat people over the head with it, but you do want to share truth. Isn't it more loving to tell somebody that is going to perish, hey, I don't want you to perish? Is that not a more loving message than to just let them go off a cliff? I mean, if you really love somebody, wouldn't you tell them the truth? But this culture wants to say, no, don't tell people the truth. Let them do whatever they want and let them burn themselves into wherever they want to go. That's not loving. And that's not what we're even called to do as followers of Jesus. But it's hard. And the more this culture goes that direction, as he points out so well, the more we're going to see this kind of craziness. Because when your morality is not based on any kind of real foundation, I don't know what it's going to be based on. So we're going to see this kind of craziness, and they're going to have to say, well, you can't preach to me about the Bible because the Bible tells me I'm not good enough and I can't do it on my own. And that's very offensive to me. Right. Yes, I can't do it on my own. Neither can you. None of us can do it on our own. Again, read through Romans. We can't do it on our own, which is why it's such good news that we have Jesus and we don't have to do it on our own. This is the beautiful, hopeful message of the gospel, but people don't want to hear it because that's offensive to them. So I was reading around, as I mentioned, in 1 Peter. I think it's really good. I think I'll end here today and just talk about 1 Peter 2:12. Keep your behavior excellent among the Gentiles, so that in the thing which they slander you as evildoers, they may, because of your good deeds, as they observe them, glorify God on the day of visitation. Now, it's kind of a weird way to say things, but I want to pull a couple pieces out of this. And go and read 1 Peter 2 if you haven't for a while. 1, you need to live right and holy lives with God's grace and the Holy Spirit. We're called to do that. We're called to live differently as believers. You need to live right and holy lives. That's number 1. Number 2, you will be slandered by the culture who hates God and hates you. You will be. They're going to call you names. They're going to arrest you. They're going to say you can't say those things here. You're going to be kicked off the places. Maybe worse. You will be slandered. However, that's number 1. Live right and holy lives, even though you will be slandered by people. And then number 3, don't do the things they accuse you of doing. So this is the hard one sometimes, because we are emotional and frustrated and reactive people. Don't do the things they accuse you of doing. They're going to call you names. Don't live up to those names. The slander is just that. It's just lies about who you are and what you do. It's not true. So don't do the things that they lie about you. And then finally, number 4, someday, somehow, and this is the part I can't fully answer for you, but this is what Peter tells us. Someday, somehow, when every knee bows and every tongue confesses that Jesus Christ is Lord, those same people who condemned you because of your faith will finally say, oh, you mean that God? This is the way that's going to go. And this is why we have to proclaim the good news, because God is real. This is his kingdom now, and he is going to stand right in front of us as the ruler and authority in all of the world, and every knee is going to bow and every tongue is going to confess, and we need to have an answer for that hope that we have. So a quick takeaway as we conclude today. In the time of these ex-evangelicals, as we've talked through some of these, where people have deconstructed their faith to the point that it no longer resembles actual Christianity as we read it in the Bible, it's important to realize why. This culture really, really wants what they want. And they don't believe the word no is an answer found in the Bible. They only want to hear yes. They want to hear yes from culture. They want to hear yes from the celebrities. They want to hear yes from you. And they will not be satisfied until they hear that from everywhere. So here's my question of the day to take this home. Is your pastor speaking out about this kind of immoral behavior? Not specifically any of these examples, but this kind of thing. Because if your pastor is not speaking out about this kind of behavior, you can be sure this kind of behavior will find its way into your congregation. And they'll love it too, just like culture does. For Church Public, I'm Matt Odegaard. As always, keep the faith. As always, I'm Matt Odegaard. Thank you so much for stopping by. If this has been helpful or interesting, hit a review, hit like, hit share, send it to a friend. And as always, I will see you next time.